Jai Hind and welcome to deftalks. This is Aadi for my second update of the day. The first one was about US troops in Ukraine. The less I say about that, the more, the better it is. Anyways, what I wanted to discuss in this particular video is External Affairs Minister Jaishankar actually gave a very interesting speech in the IAM Calcutta yesterday. It was about India and the world. Of course, his speech was long and it had a lot of other things that he spoke about. I want to actually talk about certain things that are very critical to India and tell us what is actually happening, and of course, try and analyze how things are actually going forward in his view. And I'm going to start and I'm going to read out a couple of phrases and talk about these particular phrases in a sort of an analysis as to figure out what's happening with the Indian foreign affairs and what does External Affairs Minister Jaishankar actually think about what's happening around the place, right? One of the things that I'd like to do before I, get into the subject is request you all to hit the like button, check your subscriptions, bell icons, very critical so that you get to know of these short little updates that I'm doing for you all the time about various different subjects on news that is happening around us. And of course, yes, please, if you can, do contribute to the Dev Talks effort with the ways that are mentioned here. I'm going to start talking about what he said, and he said developments like the pandemics, conflicts, terrorism, national disasters have brought foreign policy to every home. That's something that we see. We are also, as a matter of fact, discussing it on Dev Talks quite a bit, but we didn't should not be apprehensive and become defensive in our approach. This is something that the West would try and let us do, is to kind of be a little apprehensive with regards to our approach towards foreign policy because of moral standings, as the West puts it. And I'm going to use the word globalism and globalists rather than the word collective West from now on, because that's a phenomenon that we are seeing. I'm going to be doing a talk about this with someone very shortly, so stay tuned for that. He goes on to say, as foreign policy impacts us so deeply, we have an obligation to take interest in games nations play. And these are not my words, these are his. Games nations play. The world is full of responsibilities, and Indians are doing quite a bit in terms of utilizing the global workspace, leveraging capital and technology. Indians are intrinsic to global innovation and are traveling quite frequently. So he gave these basically the advantages of being associated with India very clearly. He also said that Indian diplomacy is striving to ensure better access, stronger protection, and greater opportunities for all Indian citizens, not just in India but around the world. He also said that it is very hard to separate vulnerabilities from dependence or risks from benefits in a globalized world. Now, this is a very important statement. I'm going to repeat it: hard to separate vulnerabilities from dependence or risks from benefits in a globalized world. We know what is happening. We know how entire supply chains have been disrupted. We know how sanctions have been put up on various different countries at pretty much a whim. He goes on to say, need for reliable and supply chains offer India another chance to board the bus of manufacturing. Tells us which direction we are heading. Ease of doing business and the PLI schemes intend to do that. As a matter of fact, I believe during the Diwali time, the PLI schemes resulted in a total business increase of about, a huge amount, about 8,000 odd crores with regards to the domestic consumption of Diwali gifts and stuff like that that used to be imported from, we all know where, our very friend China. Scale of digital delivery in food, finance, health, pension, and social benefits is generating respect. Is this particular aspect, I mean, has not been recognized by the world. They've kind of just blindfolded themselves to the fact that India has been literally taking care of 80 million, 800 million of its people for the past 2 years by providing them food and many other things, apart from doing the development and the entire work which is happening in terms of making India a better, sort of a place, and development in terms of reach to its own people. Uh, Now is the time where he actually starts hitting, if I may. He said the weaponization of everything is leading to a larger change in international affairs. Trade, connectivity, debt, resources, and even tourism have become points of political pressure. Gaming of global rules and practices for national advantage can no longer be overlooked. This is a very telling statement with regards to especially the globalists in the collective West, who have basically taken it on themselves to pretty much weaponize everything. There's weaponization of gold, sorry, oil. There's weaponization of gas. There's weaponization of water. There's weaponization of climate. There is weaponization of course, forex, and that's the dollar. Most important thing to remember, this particular weaponization was looked at by India very carefully sometime in March and April, when the whole game of sanctions started coming in, where decisions were taken in March and April. I'm sure the looking happened a little before. The diversification of Indian forex and the beginning in terms of reduction of dollar dependency has started in India. We know India is now trading with multiple countries within the region and little further away with their own and our own currency, to ensure that this particular vulnerability could be kept away. This is a big financial vulnerability. We must remember today, even Russia's $300 billion have been held up by the collective West. That's a great big vulnerability. Without, you can keep fighting it, but there's nothing that's going to come out. After that, he says sharpening great power competition. Today, we hear news of US troops in Russia. I don't know which direction this entire European issue is going to go, but great power competition between USA, Russia, and USA, China, of course, is something that we all know about. Sharpening of great power competition is inevitably creating stress factors across multiple domains. We are not just moving towards a different model of global interaction, but also of greater national opportunities. I think this has been recognized by India in terms of Atmanirbhar Bharat. There can be a huge amount of criticism with regards to Atmanirbhar Bharat and so on and so forth. But please do understand, this concept came in India first, and after that, people have started talking about be European, buy American, and so on and so forth. Uh, the Atmanirbhar Bharat, if done well, is going to pave our way in terms of self reliance and ensuring these vulnerabilities are reduced. The political consequences of globalization has created its own backlash. The world is seeing a revived interest in strategic autonomy. Globalization, in a word, in a term, means that, one for all for one sort of a thing, reduction of borders, free trade, and so on and so forth. This also creates dependencies which result in vulnerabilities. And of course, when politics gets mixed into this, we know what exactly is happening in front of us. And the biggest statement I think that he mentioned here is, when self appointed custodians of correctness sit in judgment over global happenings, they cannot get away with it forever, especially when they have such a strong vested interest in the outcomes. That is, I think, one of the most telling statements which has been put across towards this whole globalist cabal, which is taking the world down towards, I don't know which direction. He further says unfairness of globalization and stresses of COVID experience have been aggravated by shortages and costs that derive from the developments in Ukraine. As a result, we are headed for a far more uncertain and insecure future. I know we all know what the IMF has been talking about the future in terms of economics and India's role in it. If we are able to get this right, ladies and gentlemen listening to me, we are going to be on the right track. He further says India, having such a large segment of vulnerable population, has to meditate the impact of negative trends. We not only have to stand up for welfare, but speak on behalf of the global South. That is again a very telling statement where India is trying to take a leadership role of the global South. Myself and General Shankar had done a video about this in terms of the centrality of India and creation of a third pole. It is something that we need to recognize. It is something that we need to understand. India today has an opportunity to become a third pole between the East and the West, so called, as it's being termed around the place. He also said that we now have a responsibility and ability of shaping the global landscape. It is expressed in various different concepts like Quad, I2U2, and so on and so forth. The biggest one that India is leading is the iSolar Alliance, and that's something which is being recognized around the world. On the economic front, we've been judicious in the manner and extent by which engaging with the rest of the world. Something that we must recognize about the kind of vote of thanks given by the leaders of the world in this time during the UN. People who were right across in the Bahamas were giving thanks to the Indian efforts in terms of medicines and vaccines that were given to them and a clear reference to the United States being such a large, developed superpower, not being able to help a neighbor just a couple of 100 kilometers away from their own borders. Another thing that he says, that challenges in the next few years have earned us great credit for forthcoming, and there are a few reasons that India would be taken more seriously. Our handling of COVID, I've been saying this for quite a long time. COVID is going to be a point on the graph where China falls and India rises. Our growing economic relevance in the world and independent foreign policy, one of the biggest things in an increasing polarized world, speaks itself for the global south, where India is taking decisions for its own self. It's having a bit of a hard time convincing a lot of people. But let me tell you one thing: India is being respected by a lot of people around the world for taking this particular stand. Of course, there are loads of other contributions that India has been able to do in terms of solar energy, disaster, first responders during disasters, resilience, maritime security, counterterrorism, and so on and so forth. Another biggest thing is that India is trying to push across its perception or the reality of the civilizational state that we are across the world, ensuring a certain amount of soft power. And this is not what he said, this is what I'm trying to say, in terms of pushing across a certain soft power around the world, uh, with regards to this, the whole new dimension of the world, right? He also says big issues of our times cannot be solved without India's contribution or participation. He further says as India, this is a moment where India resets the terms of its engagement with the rest of the world. Also, a juncture where we should be prepared to take up greater responsibilities. Very telling statement. People, it is very, very important for us to understand that this world is going to change, and if India takes the right steps, we're going to be bang in the front without realizing, without us realizing what exactly actually took place to get us right there. There's a lot of work which is happening in the back end. We as citizens also need to get our act together in terms of getting to know what's happening around the world and forming the right perceptions and the right narratives. The last line that he said, bottom line, India matters more. I don't think there is any shock or doubt in that. India matters much more than what it did in the past couple of years. Of course, I would rather say that the handling of COVID was one of the biggest things that brought India into the map of the world, where the entire vaccine production and the way India handled its own COVID problems really, really kicked off a lot of things. I have a question, by the way. I don't take questions during these updates, but I'm going to take this particular question. One odd question here and there, guys, is fine. So I will take this one question. What does he say? Mighty KK 006. One short, but buddy 007 is what it is. Anyways, given the chilling of Indo-US relations under Biden, do you think this will translate into a loss of investment sanctions from the West? How much will India's economic growth be impacted? I don't think anything, sir, because the West and the collective West and the globalists very clearly know India, with its own strategic economy, strategic autonomy of decisions, and its internally sufficient economy, would be able to ride this entire wave out. The US today needs us as much as we need them. It's not going to be a one-sided relationship that what is perceived to be by till a few years ago, if I may. Things are different. India cannot be ignored anymore. It's not something that any country would want to do. It's very, very critical for us to understand. We need to, and I'll take this one point, guys. I don't want to cross the 15-minute mark. We're at 14:11. India needs to stand firm. Outside shocks are coming. Absolutely. Outside shocks will be coming our way multiple times. And as a matter of fact, impact where the IT industry is sanctioned. Sir, there are loads of processes and stuff like that. I'm not from the IT industry, but there are loads of processes that India is centric to. Remember, if the world can sanction India, these sanctions go both ways. And sanctions don't work. We've seen what's happening in Russia. We've seen what's happening around the place. We've seen they've sanctioned the living daylight out of North Korea. He's still firing missiles. Anyways, I'm going to come back in the evening with General Shankar with regards to a program to understand Indian firepower. the bringer of peace. Artillery, as a matter of fact, is known as the god of war, and General Shankar was the Director General of Artillery during his term. Piyush also says, if India matters most, why is BBC, New York Times criticizing India? Well, sir, to be in a simple word, they're jealous, right? It is, jokes apart, this is what they're going to do. It's called building a narrative against India to keep India down, to keep India underconfident, right? I'm going to end this here. We've crossed the 15-minute marker, which I didn't want to. Thank you so much for joining me. Before you sign off, like, subscribe, bell icon. Yes, if you can, please join in as a member of deftalks. Send us a sticker or a super chat. Takes a lot of effort and a lot of energy to do these little updates all through the day. And of course, visit my website, www.thedeftalks.com. I'm going to be writing some more stuff and putting it up there. There's an article a week which comes out with some in-depth analysis. And of course, if you can, if you want to directly contribute to me, you can always hit the UPI number written on your screen. Till the evening, guys. Jai Hind.